I'm here with Dr. Yassin, Director of Research at the Yassin Faris Institute at the American University of Beirut. He's an expert in health, youth, refugee policy, development planning, and post-conflict policy making. So I was able to read your paper, Sects in the City, about mistrust in the youth in post-conflict areas. And I want to know if that's a broader trend going on across the Arab world in the wake of the Arab Spring, or is that something more localized to Syria and Lebanon?
Well, I think this is a result of the divisions that get, accentuated by the conflict. So we did that study on the youth in Beirut, university students or university-age students in Beirut. And I would assume this is the same in any conflict or post-conflict settings. And particularly that research was interesting as it highlights those levels of mistrust and complexity of the relationship, I would say, because the relationship wasn't just purely, fully divided. I mean, people used to socialize at different levels, but yet the quality of the socialization and the quality of the relationships was not to a level that people will live in this coexistence from, coming from different cultural or religious backgrounds. So if we take those, findings from Beirut, I think those largely apply to the situation now in places like Iraq, Syria, and other places, or Yemen, where there is some, there's conflict, and there's violent conflict in most of these places, but also there's an increased divisions in society between different cultural groups. So sectarian communities largely in Syria and Iraq, but also some other tribal and cultural divisions in Yemen, and in Lebanon, sectarian and religious. So yes, I think, I haven't seen real evidence on this based on research, but we've seen a lot of the studies that look into, the youth aspirations, youth situation in the Arab world, and there's high levels of mistrust, and there's high levels of mistrust also of the state itself, and between the youth and the state. So it's actually, in conflict societies, there's a lot of mistrust, but also at the level of how the youth across the Arab world, which has the highest percentage of youth in the globe, have really low aspirations and low levels of trust with their state and with the way the state of affairs is.
Excellent, excellent. Now, despite its problems, Lebanon has a functioning democracy and relatively educated youth. Would you say that Lebanon is a success?
I wouldn't say it's a success. I think Lebanon has surprisingly been relatively stable amid all the, uncertainty and tension and divisions and conflicts in the Arab world. And largely such stability in Lebanon, or relative stability in Lebanon, is related that it's a country that has, moved from a conflict situation into a post-conflict situation. So perhaps people were not ready to fall again in the game of violence and war and civil war. But I wouldn't say it's a successful model, although it has become, increasingly it has become the model for other Arab nations that are currently in conflict. So if you look at Iraq, if you look at Syria, look at Yemen, increasingly Lebanon is seen as perhaps the model for those countries when they go when they move, out from the conflict, when they move into the post-conflict. And I'm not sure this is the best model, although it might function. Now, the issue of the Lebanese model, specifically after 1990, the post-war, post-conflict Lebanon, it goes in cycles. You really don't get into a situation where there is complete and satisfactory normalcy. I mean, there are like cycles of normalcy, and there are cycles of tension. And such normalcy and normal situation need to be delicately kept. So really there is a fine, game here where different actors need to maintain this delicate situation of peace or communal peace or relative peace. But the interests of all communities or all different groups are still maintained. And that becomes a source of conflict and tension because there's competition over resources, over positions, over gains, and so on and so forth. Again, yet this has become kind of the model for the other Arab nations if they move out of their civil war and conflicts.
Right, and it seems that post-Civil War conflicts in Lebanon have been peripheral rather than central. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't say it's post-Civil War in the sense of the post-Civil War tension or violence.
Right.
Yes, there is more stability in the center. There is a relatively functioning, at least bureaucracy. It's a functioning government. Maybe not all of the times, but the system works with its minimal or minimum capacity to maintain, like the army, like the police, like the judiciary, and even maintaining elections. Sometimes it's being postponed. It's not completely satisfactory in its practices as elections, but actually there is some kind of the form is there, at least the
right.
form of these is there. But also Lebanon went through many assassinations, or actually witnessed a lot of assassinations in the post-conflict phase, and that's another indicator of this fragile peace that Lebanon is in.
Right.
And I think the numbers are between 35 to 40. There's I've been part of a research that we actually listed them, so maybe you can access this. So this is on one hand. On the other hand, there are a lot of tension in certain communities or in certain areas, whether in Palestinian camps, there are a lot of tension, particularly in the southern camps in Saida, between the Palestinian faction and sometimes between Palestinians and Lebanese. But also there's sometimes rising tension between Islamist groups and radical groups. There's also engagement of political and military factions from Lebanon and Syria at the moment. So it's not completely stable. That's why I wouldn't say this is a fully functional model at the moment, although it's been in a relative peace and a relative stability.
Right. I think that most people, at least in the center of the country in Beirut, feel safe.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Of course. Sometimes it's safer than being in another more developed and a functioning democracy or nation.
Excellent. You made an interesting point that the Arab world has more youth than any other part of the world, and the conflict in Syria has been particularly devastating to them. We have essentially a lost generation that have had no education. Now, I know you're somewhat of an expert on youth policy and post-conflict, and I just want to know what you think a post-conflict Syria looks like, and what, as an addendum to that, what would be the path forward for those youths that have missed years of schooling?
Yeah. I think this is really a key issue in the current war in Syria is the future of the youth. And when you look at the losses, there are of course 600, some people say 600 deaths or fatalities in Syria, millions of people displaced inside Syria and outside. We don't know yet the size of the people who were injured or disabled. All of these we would know if things get into a relative peace in Syria. So we can't tell at the moment. The disaster of the Syrian war on its population is clear now. There is a huge impact of the war on them. But also they lost around 30 years of human development gains. So this is like Syria 30 years back, including education, health, life expectancy, and so on.
Yeah, even housing.
Even housing, Those the Syrian youth, which is actually again a young population, Syria is a young population, are really the most affected or impacted by the war. You look at Lebanon at the moment and the region, only 4% of them make it to the higher education. Only 4% of the Syrian youth, refugee youth, or Syrians who are living in those nations, Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, are making it to higher education, which is a very, very low number. Actually, not the numbers are low in higher education, even in high school. So there's a high dropout after the grade 9 or 8 or 9 or something. So after the age of 15, where they can actually go and work, and this is alarming. This is concerning because you need to train those people to go back and rebuild their country, and they'll just end doing informal jobs, basic jobs, low skill jobs. I mean, that means the future is really dark, and it's not really promising for them to be active in rebuilding their country. And those with better skills and higher education actually made it to Europe or America or maybe other places, but mostly to Europe. So this is actually the main concern here. How we're going to the workforce, the young workforce that you need to use in rebuilding Syria has been siphoned or has become at the moment low skilled, without any prospects. Maybe some of them are fighting and others are doing basic jobs around in neighboring countries, or those who are better off that just left to Europe because they can afford, and because also policies in northern more developed countries are actually they pick those who can easily integrate. So for example, doctors now in Germany, the largest percentage of foreign doctors registered in the last couple of years is Syrian.
Really?
So that's an indicator how the human resources and human capital of Syria has been lost.
A brain drain in a way.
It is a brain drain in many ways, and you're not actually developing those young at the moment. They're dropping out at an early stage in their school, and just to get a living, and support their families or their mothers. So this is really concerning.
Now,
and so how the future of Syria will look like? I mean, no one knows, but it's definitely very, very challenging, and definitely there are divisions. So it's challenging on the human capital end, and it's challenging because there are divisions. There are a lot of horizontal divisions now in society with different groups, and trying to heal those social relations is going to be much more challenging and complex than just rebuilding the roads and houses and so on.
Right.
And especially that Syria was multicultural. I mean, to a large extent, a lot of the cities were mixed cities, with some minorities here and there, but actually it is a mixed country, multicultural country. And now it's being more and more is being, homogenized by the war, different communities staying together and so on and so forth. So it's going to be, if I say it's going to be challenging, it's kind of a
bit of an understatement.
Fact, but I'm going to say that this aspect of rebuilding social relations is going to be very complex and very tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it seems that Assad is eventually going to be victorious, and what that means remains to be seen, but he seems to be winning. Whether he's able to assert control over the entire country, we don't know, but at least in the central axis of Damascus to Aleppo and then to the shoreline of the Mediterranean, he has control and there's some stability, and it seems he's going to expand his territory of control. Do you think that with the Assad government regaining territory and bringing a modicum of stability to Syria, that any higher educated refugees will return, or do you think they'll stay in the countries they've gone to?
This is a key question, and the return of refugees would require safety, would require that it has to be voluntary as well.
Right.
People need to be voluntarily going back. and it needs, stability and resources. So it's safety, stability, and potential to do work, and of course voluntary. Would that be available, or would that actually emerge in Syria? I'm not sure. No one knows. I mean, all of these are unknowns at the moment, whether the government would actually enhance its control and stabilize or not. That's if you look at other parallels, look at Iraq, for example. There are a lot of tension, even in or like violence, acts of violence, like car bombs, suicide bombs, and so on, in places that are relatively been stable, like Baghdad and other places. So you never know how things would unfold with the in Syria. But Syria would still be divided, and that's also another concern. So it's not like very stable country, or again is regaining its stability. It's going to be things are not going to be normal or going back as they were before the crisis, like 6 years ago. So this is kind of an unknown, a question with a lot of unknowns. Now, what we know of these unknowns is that people cannot just be pushed to go back.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So they need really to voluntarily go back, and they need to get the incentives and the right environment for them to accept that they can, or actually to facilitate for them their living and livelihood and so on. And some people want to return to their own places of origin, to where they were living. Because if they actually just move them from being refugees to being IDPs in Syria, you're not solving the problem.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if someone is a refugee from
Hasaka or something.
Yeah, Hasaka, just put them in the coast or in Idlib or in. It doesn't solve the situation. You're just postponing things.
Right.
And you're just claiming that this has become kind of relatively normal. I think the experts and people who work on refugee policy are really aware of this point. You don't just say, let's return. There's some relative stability now around Damascus, or in Damascus.
Right.
You just can't get IDPs in Damascus, because this is also pushing the problem from host countries into host communities inside Syria. It really needs to be seen in a comprehensive way.
Yeah, and the more IDPs, the more strain on the stable areas as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of the education of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, you said that only 4% reach higher education. Why is that number so low?
The number is low is from, you have to go backward and see, in the high schools. I mean, the dropouts from the middle schools or from after basic education to the high school is really high. So, only 4% make it actually to high school, to grade 10, 11, 12, or 11 and 12. So, they're leaving at the age of 14, 15 and so on. So that's why you have a very small, percentage of those students making it into higher education. The key here is the quality of education. Schools are open. The public schools are running an afternoon or evening shift for Syrians. But the quality of the education hasn't been, up to the highest standards where actually it would allow students to continue into high school and later into university. Although the accessibility now is granted, so people can access schools and access education, which is great from the government of Lebanon to open all its public schools. The percentage of students who are outside is still around 50%. And those who are making it to high school and later to university are still minimal. So quality is key. So the second factor here is that those are leaving schools to go and help their families. The cost of living is high, so you need every member to join in and pitch for the livelihood of the family. So you see them around working in informal jobs and mini markets supermarkets or in farms and biqa or any other job.
Mm.
And there are some reported cases of bullying as well, and they feel like they're not, in some instances, welcome in the school, so they say, okay, we'll just leave and work. We're not interested in education anymore.
Right.
And another factor that we've established through research that we're analyzing at the moment and finalizing is also related to the education of parents. Most of the Syrians in Lebanon are poor. 70% of them are below the poverty line. Most of them are with very basic education.
So there's no history of education in the family.
The middle classes are leaving.
Mm.
And maybe we don't capture them also in our reporting, or maybe they're not registered with UNHCR as well. So we end just knowing those million plus Syrian refugees who are registered with the UN. So those are the poorest. Those are actually the most needy, and they have only basic levels of education, and this is the vicious circle. So when we're not offering them the best quality education, and they don't see the prospects of that, they're coming from poor backgrounds with some, basic education level of their parents, and they want to support their family. It becomes, unfortunately, a formula where they just drop out and go and work.
Too many pressures, economic, social, even educational.
Even educational, quality of teaching, and so on. Different curriculum. They don't follow the Syrian curriculum, and also they have to get into English or French languages, not the Arabic that they are used to. Get even sciences, and mathematics. All of them are not in Arabic in Syria here. They're in foreign languages and so on. So they end saying, we'll just drop out. All the factors come together, unfortunately, just to push them out of the school. And again, this is a fact now that they're dropped out of school, but also those non-college educated Syrians are now competing a lot with the non-college educated Lebanese.
Right.
Although those are less in number compared to the proportion of Syrians in this category of people compared to Syrian youth, compared to Lebanese, but still, jobs in Lebanon are minimal. Lebanon is not a country that creates a lot of jobs, particularly in the formal economy, or maybe in the informal economy. So there's a lot of tension on such informal jobs. The tension between the Syrians, non-college educated Syrians in the ages of 17 to 25 with those Lebanese in that age. Example, delivery men to do the delivery from restaurants, takeaways, supermarkets and so on. Mostly now there's occupied by Syrians and some, these are anecdotes, I don't have the numbers, but
right.
These are anecdotes. And there will be competition on such jobs, on such or similar jobs, these basic non-skilled jobs.
And that competition is another factor that would hinder any sort of integration going on.
Yeah, the Syrians are more integrated in Lebanon than any other place because
Right.
they know the country.
Right.
But that will create tension.
Yeah.
Create tension, we already see it, and people report it, and sometimes in the news, sometimes it gets exaggerated, but there is competition in certain areas, in certain spaces that I'm mentioning here, like those non-skilled jobs by non-college educated Lebanese and Syrians. I'm not sure about other sectors. We try to explore this area of research, but it's quite complex because you need to go to the informal economy, and the informal economy would require a lot of skills to understand and so on. But anecdotally, there is competition on those jobs.
Interesting. Now, in terms of reconstruction in post-war Syria and the Syrian refugee crisis, to solve it, it's going to take a massive effort, as you said. Do you think that effort post-conflict is going to be mostly from national governments, NGOs, or the UN? Where do you think that effort's going to come from?
I think all, but if you want to learn from the experience of Lebanon and in places where Lebanon wasn't so successful in, you really need the government to intervene here. It cannot happen just by civil society and the UN. You really need the government to look into those who were displaced. I mean, Lebanon waited like 10 years to acknowledge that there are 17,000 people who were just displaced in Lebanon and their fate was unknown. So then it created a commission to look into this and so on. I mean, Syria, the numbers are much higher. So you need to look into this is one aspect of it, But then issues of reconciliation, issues of, the transitional justice and how it's going to be run in a country coming, from intense violence and collective violence. All of these questions, I think, would need a government that would look into these in a just, critical, and comprehensive way. You cannot just say, okay, we'll move on. Those were others, those were terrorists, those were not us.
Right.
I mean, this cannot happen in this way. I think we need to really look into what happened during the war and really do a good effort here to reconcile with people coming together and addressing it. And I mean, Lebanon didn't do so. We woke up. I mean, I was young at that time. I was still, in school, but we just woke up, and the war was over. Okay, fine. We all celebrated the war was over, but that's it. You can't just say the war was over and you move. I mean, it wasn't just a dispute with your neighbor,
Right.
People were killed, kidnapped, disappeared, injured. People were exchanged, and so on and so forth. So you really, and in Syria, I think the magnitude is even higher. The intensity of the war has even been more and more than what we saw in Lebanon. So you need actually to really look into this. And any, unity government, national unity government in Syria that would eventually happen, would need to look into those issues of reconciliation, reconciling with the past, looking at those who have disappeared, and so on and so forth. That's why, again, it would be simplistic just to say it's going to be complex, but it's really going to be a complicated matter that cannot be done or seen as like, well, let's move on. Return the page and move on. I don't think so.
Absolutely. Would you view the youth crisis in the Middle East, both in terms of refugees and in terms of lack of education, is that the single most difficult problem the region faces, or are there other problems? I mean, there are other problems.
Definitely, there are other problems, but
is youth the most important?
I think so. I think youth of the Arab world, first the magnitude, the largest number of the youth population of 15 to 24 is here, the youth bulge, as the youth literature calls it, and so on. So, and many of those are educated. I think that the economists call them the educated, unemployed educated. And the thing in the Arab world, that the more you get educated in many countries in the Arab world, the less prospect for you to find a good job. So you are actually creating a segment of society, a large segment of society. They just get disappointed. They just feel that we got educated, we have a degree now, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, left behind almost.
Left behind.
Yeah.
The states are offering a lot of support for education, or relatively good support for education, so you can get a degree, and many of the youth are in schools and so on. This has improved a lot in the last 30, 40 years and so on. But yet, the economy hasn't actually developed in a way, especially after 2011. There's actually, the economy is slower and slower since 2011, so it cannot cope with all the needs. So creating jobs for the young has been very, very slow compared to the production of a workforce, or production workforce, labor force. And that would actually create a lot of, youth that are, they lose their aspirations, they lose their prospect for the future, they become disenfranchised. Some of them might, become active in a group, less and less so now with a lot of containment of civil society happening in the Arab world. They might go to social media and be active in social media.
Yeah, which was influential in the Arab Spring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or they might actually just, try to find a way out and migrate.
Yeah.
That's another way of coping. Or they end working in the informal economy. And really we need to really understand such, path of the youth, how they're going. And maybe others would claim, I'm not sure about this, would become radicalized, or at least they now, with such recipe, they are more susceptible for radicalization.
Absolutely. Do you think that entrepreneurship is impinged in Arab socialist states like Syria and Egypt, and that's a reason why that education has outstripped employment?
No, I think they are entrepreneurial, but the system in itself,
The
system
yeah.
doesn't support.
Exactly.
I mean, you would support startups, and I think people are by naturally, a lot of them are entrepreneurial
Yes.
in this part of the world, but it would need a system that would support, it would need an economy that's actually, viable and growing, and it would need a system that would really encourage startups. You need a functioning banking system. You need to provide a lot of loans, credits, and so on. You need to have good electricity. I mean, this is all an integrated system. If you want to look into entrepreneurs and how to, the experience in Lebanon, for example, the government through the central bank are trying to support creative industries, but actually it's not doing so well in terms of people like going and applying for such loans or grants, or because actually the system, even if the central bank has done this circular that would say I will support with really minimum rates, interest rates, any creative idea up to, I don't know, maybe $1 million, or a startup with $500,000 or something. But you need to go and apply and work by the system. You need electricity. You need good internet. You need good governance. You need less corruption. You need to go and have less red tape when you go and register your startup. And all of this, the ecosystem of creating businesses are weak in most of the Arab world, except for a few countries that are doing well, and UAE, Jordan actually is doing better than others, and so on. So really, I mean, it cannot happen. Corruption and good governance.